In the study of the minor prophets, we're not going to go through them in the order they're found in the Bible, but we're going to go in a different order. We're going to try to go in a chronological order, more of a chronological order, as to when they were written. And Joel is one prophet that we have a little trouble figuring out exactly when Joel was written. But most of the other prophets, we can figure out pretty much the time frame. So we'll divide it into two parts. We'll go through part one, be Obadiah, Joel, Jonah, Amos, and Hosea. Part two will be Micah, Zephaniah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. That will be how we'll be going through this. We'll go through them verse by verse. It'll take maybe a couple of years to get through all of it. I don't know how long it'll take, but we'll just go through it, okay? In that order. Do you have any questions?
No, sir, I sure don't.
Fine. So we're going to go ahead and minimize it. And we're going to stop sharing. Pick up again. All right, can you see the file?
Yes, sir, I can.
Good. We'll start recording. We're already recording, I think. Let me make sure it's still recording. Yes. Yes, it is. This is the first book of the minor prophets that we'll be studying. The book of Obadiah. This is our first lesson on Obadiah. Obadiah demonstrates that the Lord, or Jehovah, Yahweh is probably the correct pronunciation, had concern for Gentiles. That's important because the Jews seem to have an idea that he was just their God, but he desired to be the God of all mankind. And I'm convinced from my further study of this matter that he had people that served him under the patriarchal law that were Gentiles, and they were serving after Mount Sinai, between that time and between Acts chapter 10, when the Gentiles came in under the patriarchal law. I would date the book of Obadiah at about 850 BC, one of the earliest of the books, but this is not certain. But I've given it this date because of some internal evidence, and that's why I'm giving it this date. The attack of Jerusalem that is mentioned by Obadiah in verses 10 through 14 is either the destruction of Jerusalem by the Chaldeans, 586 BC, or it's an attack that occurred during the reign of Jehoram in 848 to 844. He reigned during that time for about 4 years BC. And we see this attack in 2 Chronicles 21 verses 8 through 10 and 21 verses 16 through 17. That's I dated with this attack in the reign of Jehoram. The date has been chosen because philological evidence, Keel and Delitzsch, they give some arguments for this, and I'm going to go with them on this date. In their scholarly commentary. Obadiah writes of foreigners entering Jerusalem's gates, but his language must be greatly stretched to get the total destruction that we see in 586 BC, but the destruction by the Chaldeans. You have to really stretch it to get that. But foreigners did enter in the gates. But there wasn't total destruction like there was when the Chaldeans came in 586 BC. Has people living in Jerusalem after the entrance of the foreigners. And again, this won't fit the destruction of Jerusalem. Okay? in 586 BC by the Chaldeans. Sets forth the fall of Edom because of their pride and cruelty and the elevation of Zion, contrasted to Seir. Now, Zion is the mountain in Jerusalem, and Seir is the mountain rapidly associated with the Edomites. Now, Edom is the name that was given, it means red. It was given to Esau, and that was his name. I think the Red Sea is Edom Sea. So I think the term red comes from that, from Edom. Zion represents Jerusalem, Israel. Sometimes it represents in the church, in the kingdom, in the New Testament. Mount Seir represents Edom, the descendants of Esau, as I just told you. Now here's what we see here, the location of Mount Seir, and we can see it, the elevation of it, Mount Seir. And I'll move my mouse around so you kind of see what I'm talking about here. Mount Seir is right here. And this is where the Edomites lived. Remember, whenever they came through the Red Sea, they didn't come through the Red Sea right here. This is wrong. They came down here, the Gulf of Aqaba, the Red Sea. When they came out of Egypt, they came across down below where my mouse is, off the bottom of the screen. And what we call the Gulf of Aqaba is called the Red Sea. It's the only body of water the Bible explicitly calls the Red Sea we can actually locate. The Bible tells us in 2 or 3 passages that Ezion Geber, right here, Ezion Geber is on the Red Sea. Okay. And so I would argue that he's dealing with Edomites in this context. Now, in chapter 1, verses 1 through 9, we have the announcement of judgment that was to come, and there was a decree to be made. The vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord Jehovah concerning Edom. Notice he starts off and he's addressing another nation, not even Israel. He's addressing the Edomites. So this was God's prophet speaking to the Edomites. God sent his prophets to the Edomites. Thus saith the Lord Jehovah concerning Edom, we have heard tidings from Jehovah, and an ambassador is sent among the nations, saying, arise ye, and let us rise up against her to battle. So now there's somebody has been sent, and this is God sending, I believe, somehow, through his providence, somehow, bringing about other nations to rise up against Edom in battle. And so they're going to be destroyed or overthrown. This is God either sending angels to actually encourage other nations to overrun Edom, or it could be God providentially causing other nations to overrun him. I would go probably with the providence, but I couldn't say it wasn't through angels having been sent, such as in the form of men or whatever. Okay, but I would go probably with the second, probably providence. The spiritual condition of the Edomites is that they were deceived by their pride, and they were despised by other people and debased in their. Once pride gets in, you begin to think I can do just virtually anything and get by with it, and because I'm so important or so powerful or so wise or so smart, and pride can fill us with these things that will cause us to not control ourselves and we'll become debased. This was their problem. In verse 2, he says, behold, I have made thee small among the nations, thou art greatly despised. Now here, the Edomites, if you go back, and let's go back to it, we'll get back to it just in a minute, to the map. The people would come along the east edge of the Gulf of Aqaba, that's really the Red Sea, come across through here and bring caravan routes coming up from the south, trade routes that had come through. And so they control this area right in here. Edomites did. They controlled it and would raid the caravans. So that's exactly what we're seeing here, and that's why they were despised. That's how they made the living. Now, in verse 3, he goes on and says, "The pride of thy heart hath deceived thee, O thou that dwellest in the cleft of the rocks." Have you ever heard of the city of Petra? It's in a canyon, and they cut their housing right out of the walls of the rock of the canyon. Actually built inside the rock. I've always wanted to go and see Petra. I had planned to do that and go and see Petra and go to Israel and see Petra. But I've decided it's not going to happen. Okay, but I wanted to see it. But I could use that money for something better. O thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, and saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Their city of Petra was like a fortress, and it was very hard to get into the city. Some didn't even know how to find it. So they'll mount up on high as the eagle, and though thy nest be set among the stars, I will bring thee down from thence, saith Jehovah, saith the Lord. I would encourage you to get on the internet and just see the pictures of Petra. This is one of their cities. Well, there's basically a capital city to a certain extent. And Petra is Greek for rock. So they chiseled out of the side of the canyon walls, out of the rock. They chiseled their houses, and they had cisterns for water. They bring water in and have water to drink. Right? They raid the caravans. Okay. Here it is. There's Petra. And this is modern Jordan. It's in the nation of Jordan here. And so I had planned to go to Israel and maybe go down to Petra and visit that, but it didn't happen. COVID came in and hit me. And so that's going to get me from going. And I've decided it's not worth it. And there's so much war going over there right now. I wouldn't go in there. Okay. Certainly wouldn't go over there now. Any questions? Right. That gives us a better picture of what we see there. Way into Petra, here's what it looks like. And it would be easy to fight against an army trying to get in there. Okay. Here's their buildings cut out of the chisel out of the rocks on the side of the cliffs, and the side of the hills, and the side of the canyon walls. Here's some of this was chiseled out of the rocks. And that's I guess a treasury building. It's a treasury building in Petra. Here's a theater. They had a theater. So it was a fine place. Now, the completeness of that destruction is decreed now in chapter 1, verses 5 through 6 of Obadiah. And this is going to be complete destruction. If thieves came to thee, if robbers by night, how thou cut off, would they steal only till they had enough? If grave gatherers came to thee, would not leave some gleanings, they would pick what they get right quick and then leave. But he says they would leave you some gleanings. You could get some grapes around here and there to eat. As they saw searched, how they hid treasure sought out. They're going to come in and take and search out everything they can find that's yours. That's what they're going to do when they take over your city. Ezekiel also prophesied of the total destruction of Edom, which was to come in Ezekiel 35, 2 through 9. And of course, Ezekiel was later. That destruction didn't come until later. Some would say that this would imply that this prophecy right here was in Ezekiel's time, but not so necessarily so. We have prophecies that reach several hundred years into the future. God can know the future 1,000 years in the future easily because God is timeless. He is a timeless being. I call it the omnichronos nature of God. He exists in a timeless domain. Ezekiel 35:2 through 9, we'll go through these verses. Son of man, this is an expression used when addressing Ezekiel, God addressing Ezekiel. Set thy face against Mount Seir and prophesy against it. So you prophesy against Mount Seir. That Mount Seir, we've already told you, represents Edom, the nation of Edom. That's their mountain that's associated with them. And say unto it, thus saith the Lord Jehovah, behold, I am against thee, O Mount Seir. I will stretch out my hand against thee, and I will make thee a desolation and astonishment. The city is desolate now, right now. I will lay thy cities waste, and thou shalt be desolate, and thou shalt know that I am the Lord, I am Jehovah, I am Yahweh. Now, Esau should have continued to serve God. His father served God, Isaac, but he married the wrong wives and they turned him away. I'm satisfied. That was part of it. And he wasn't spiritually minded to begin with, anyhow. But his wives didn't help him. Maybe he chose wives of that nature because he wasn't spiritually minded. Because it has had a perpetual enmity against Israel, say, and has given over the children of Israel to the power of the sword in the time of their calamity and the time of the iniquity of the end. So you've helped the enemies to take the children of Israel and to bring them as captives and make slaves out of them. That's exactly what he's talking about. In verse 6, it says, 6, here, Ezekiel 35:6, therefore, as I live, saith the Lord Jehovah. This is more of an oath. God says, but as I live, I will prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee, since thou hast not hated blood, therefore blood shall pursue thee. Hating blood is not the hating of blood. Blood is put here, it's probably a synecdoche, to represent the death of a person. The shedding of blood, see, is what he's talking about here. You've not hated it. Now, when men go off to war and they get to the point where they just want to kill people, they've gone too far. And so people can be that way. They just love to kill people. Thus will I make Mount Seir an astonishment and a desolation. It was a powerful place, and they could control these caravans and raid them or make them pay tribute to come through their land. That's why I make Mount Seir an astonishment and a desolation. I will cut off from it him that passeth through and him that returneth. So I'm going to cut them off from this nation. So the nation of Edom will cease to exist. We don't have an Edomite nation today, and there never will be again. I will fill its mountains with its slain, its hills and its valleys, and all the watercourses shall they fall that are slain with the sword. I will make thee a perpetual desolation. And I said, ye shall not be inhabited, and ye shall know that I am Jehovah. That land today is desolate. It's a desert. Now, there's the Bedouins may move in among it, move across it, but it doesn't have very many people in it. It's more or less desolate, perpetually desolate. And you say, how long will that be desolate? I believe it's perpetual, probably continue to the end of time. That climate has changed throughout the world since the flood. It's been changing. And that land probably had a lot more rain at one time than it does now. We know Israel did, and so I would assume that they probably did too. So now it's basically a desert. Knowing of Jehovah, I want you to know this. Verse 9, and I will make thee a perpetual desolation. I said, ye shall not be inhabited, and ye shall know that I am Jehovah. You're going to come to that knowledge. Now, I think there's something here that sometimes we miss. The idea of knowing God is to be intimate with God. The Bible says a man knew his wife, and it's an intimate relationship, conjugal relations. But what we see here, you're going to know that I'm Jehovah. You're going to come to that knowledge, and they're going to repent. And there were people who became Christians who were out of the Edomite nation. And I think that's what he's referring to probably in this context. Knowing of Jehovah is probably their conversion to Christianity or to becoming Christians. I think this is Ezekiel 35:15. We see this in Amos 9, verses 11 through 12, and Acts 15 to 19. Well, let's look at Ezekiel 35:15 first. And thou didst rejoice over the inheritance of the house of Israel, because it was desolate. So what I do unto thee, thou shalt be desolate, O Mount Seir. Again, he's talking to the Edomites. And all Edom, even all of it, and they shall know that I am Jehovah. Again, this is to come to that knowledge. They're going to know it, and they're going to become servants of mine, my servants. They're going to be intimate with me. And the way they could do that is if they became servants of God and obeyed him. And then after the cross, they had to become Christians. Now, Amos 9:11 tells us a similar thing. In that day will raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, because of the breaches thereof, and I will raise up its ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old. That's the house of David, tabernacle of David, that they may possess the remnant of Edom, and all the nations that are called by my name, saith Jehovah that doeth this. So they're going to possess the remnant of Edom. Now let's look back up here at the first verse, 11. I'm going to raise up the tabernacle of David. Now, some think this is the temple. I don't think it is. The tabernacle is a tent. I'm going to raise up the tent of it. I'm going to raise up David's house, because we're going to have one who's of the house of David who's going to be perpetual king forever. That would be Jesus. That's what it's referring to. I'm going to raise up the tabernacle, the tent of David, the house of David. It's fallen. And close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up its ruins. I'll build it as in the days of old, that I may possess the remnant of Eden, that they may possess the remnant of Eden. So this house of David, this tabernacle, tent of David, is going to possess, they will possess the house. They'll possess the remnant of Edom. And then the remnant usually in this context, it's somebody who's possessed by God and they're faithful. So there's going to be a remnant of Edomites that's going to be around, and they're going to become servants of God. And of course, we see this in this passage that's quoted in Acts 15 in a minute. We'll see it in a minute. All the nations that are called by my name, saith Jehovah that doeth this. So he says, I'm going to possess the remnant of Edom, but I'm going to possess all the nations that are called by my name. So these nations are going to be called by my name too. And so the nations would be the Gentiles. And the word nations is a reference to the Gentiles most of the time. Okay. In Acts 15, when this is quoted, Acts 15, there are three arguments given for the Gentiles being brought into the church. And the first argument is made by Peter, and he appeals to Acts chapters 10 and 11, what happened at the household of Cornelius. Then the next argument is what happened among the Gentiles at the first missionary journey of Paul and Barnabas. And then the last here is the quote by James, where James now is speaking in Acts 15, 15, and 16. This is James speaking. And I take it to be James, the brother of the Lord, the son of Joseph and Mary, but it might be James the less. But I think it's probably James, the brother of the Lord. That's what most commentators think, and they're probably right. Okay? And to this degree, the words of the prophets, as it is written, after these things I will return. So he's saying all the prophets say this, and he quotes one of the prophets. See? So the prophets are put for one of the prophets, because they all preached and taught the same thing about the kingdom coming. After these things I will return, I will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen. I'll build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up. See? So he's going to set up the tabernacle of David again. tent of David, the house of David. And he goes on in verse 17, that the residue of men. Now wait a second. We go back in Amos, it didn't say residue. He's talking about the Edomites. And say the residue of men, the residue, the remnant of the Edomites may seek after the Lord. Now put those two verses side by side and you see what he's talking about. He's talking about Gentiles. The Edomites represent all of the Gentile nations. They're representative of all Gentiles. And so that the residue of men may seek after the Lord and all the Gentiles on whom my name is called. Saith the Lord that maketh these things known from of old. Wherefore my judgment is to trouble not them that from among the Gentiles turn to God. Don't trouble them anymore. God said they're going to be in his kingdom. So quit fighting this, you Judaizing teachers. Quit fighting this. That's what he's basically. Amos 9, you'll see exactly what he says here. And so they will possess the remnant of Edom, the residue of men, say, in all the nations. The remnant of Edom, and let's go back over here. And he says the residue of men may seek, and all residue of men may seek after the Lord and all the Gentiles. So put them side by side, and I would encourage you to do that, and you'll see it more clearly. Any questions so far? My custom is to lecture, and if you have any questions to ask me, just ask them to stop me. Won't bother me at all. Okay. There's a sense in which Edom and all that she had come to represent was destroyed when they obeyed the gospel. There's a sense in which they're destroyed. The Bible depicts conversion like a death and a rebirth. And it's not a physical death, but it's a death of what you used to be, and you become born again or become new. Now, we learned from this that God punishes wicked nations and even punishes those that were descendants of the great man, Abraham, even his descendants. They didn't escape it. They had the obligation to have the faith of Abraham, to have his faith. If they would be blessed only if they had the faith of Abraham. And if their faith was Abraham's faith, the same as he had, then they would be blessed. If not, they would not be blessed. Because they followed the lead of their father Esau, the Edomites became profane, as he was, didn't serve the God that their father Isaac had followed. This brought about their destruction. That should conclude our lesson for tonight. Do you have any questions?
No, sir.